My goodness.
How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm so happy to see you.
I'm so happy to see you too.
Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, Andrea. I'm thankful you're here with me.
I am so thankful for you to having me. So happy to be here just talking. We've known each other for some time now, and it's just always a pleasure and a hug to be here with you, even though we're not together in form. It's just like amazing. I can feel your energy and your hug through our voices and through I'm seeing you, even though people will not be able to see, but I can just feel the hug. So I'm just like super, super grateful and ready to start.
I love it. I can feel your hug too. I'm sitting in the memory of 2019 because that's the last time that we were able to see each other physically and share a hug. Let's take a breath together. Breathe in through your nose. Hold it. Gently release. And let's drop into this moment. How's your heart doing?
Great. It's just like in total calmness and stillness. So good.
What can you thank COVID for?
Oh my goodness. The ability to pause and just be in a space where you cannot run from wherever you are and numb and understand that home is always in your heart, that even though we couldn't touch each other, I never felt like so connected to people beyond the form of being together, and that at the end of the day, it was like home was right here and within me. So it was very, very interesting, and not being able to spend money to, really numb with a lot of things that we were used to. Like I could not live without traveling, or I could not live without a new pair of shoes, or we could, and we survived. And it was very hard, but at the same time, for me, it's been a learning of, oh my goodness, letting go of my office, of my, like the form space, and just create new things in order to adapt. And the ability to adapt to stuff, we could all adapt to new ways of living. So we thought we couldn't, so
Yeah.
that was interesting.
It was. I want to ask you, what is something that people misunderstand about you that you wish that you just would like to clarify?
I think that because I am a super doer and a super superstar at so many levels, and I'm always doing stuff and very creative, and I can solve people's problems very easily. Like, oh, this is, like it's like my head is it's just constantly mapping, that there's no feelings, or there's no like a lot of deep processing, that it's not related to the head, that it's not related to be superwoman. It's just related to some struggles sometimes, and some, that deep feeling, that I need things too, and need connection to, so I would say that that's the biggest misunderstanding, or maybe that's just a projection in my head, but that's what I feel like it's more misunderstood.
You find sometimes people don't see that you're human?
Yes, a lot of times.
Yeah. What does intimacy look like for you?
That's a tough question. I mean, we always talk about intimacy, but what is it? It's like, for me, it's that part like that you're mentioning about vulnerability, be able to be vulnerable with someone, it's not even, it could be described in different nuances, like it could be intimate because you're naked with someone, like physically naked, or intimate because your soul is naked, So that connection in vulnerability with all our flaws and all, without any clothes, without any makeup, without anything at the end of the day, that is intimacy. Be able to be naked in our most raw selves and in vulnerability, like that's it. We connect and we're intimate just through showing how you feel, how I feel, like you were saying about how we women have been oppressed, and just like intimacy is the ability to go within myself in order to connect with you in a naked way, in a very raw and simple way without any adornments.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you strengthen the intimacy with yourself?
I would say that I'd spend a lot of time alone and just questioning and deconstructing for myself. Like, let's say when you ask me what is intimacy for you, it's just like I really have to go, what does that mean for me? I could give you like a general concept, but for me, so every time people really try to get to me, I try to get intimate first. Like, what is that? How does that look for me? So I'm constantly going within to understand my inner reality. We're just so caught up into the beliefs that, or the concept that everybody tells us, and I'm just like, so not against, I'm just like, let's question, and I'm always questioning, like, is this really what I'm feeling, or is this what I'm supposed to be feeling? Because if I lose someone, everybody's like, oh, are you sad? Because it's no, I could be sometimes, but I also feel a lot of things, so it's very interesting for me, and I'm always like questioning, is that how I feel? Am I really hungry? Am I really cold? Kind of thing. How is just like questioning myself, really tapping into whatever I'm feeling in the moment, so it's a constant work that it has become very not automatic because it's intentional, but the intentionality behind everything has become the automatic pilot.
Mm-hmm. The question, yeah. It's not all elated and blissful. The blissful is being able to accept, I got some shadow parts and some things that I don't understand that I'm still learning about myself. And it's still a process, even though I would like to have that sense of perfection and this sense of arrival. I know that that's an illusion, that there's still more depths of being human. And every time when my defense mechanisms come up, I have to remind myself that I'm safe to be honest with me. I don't need to reject or push away the things that feel uncomfortable because of the experiences or other people's perceptions or judgments, that I have to be able to sit in that honesty. And that can take a lot of work for me sometimes, because it's, we don't realize how many layers it takes to be honest. We have a lot of traps that it's more easier to lie in this world than it is to be honest. And so to get to that honesty, that's intimacy. To be transparent with yourself, that is where, to have that ability to stand in that truth, so that when you show up with another person, you're not in the agenda of what the expectations or what you were kind of grasping for and all that. It's work to be intimate, cultivating time in there, where a lot of people are like, no, that's not. And it's like, it's not the other person that makes you intimate. It's, you have to go within yourself and reveal that. And when you're with another person that allows you to be safe to reveal the messiness, that is beautiful partnership and intimacy. And that doesn't always have to be in a sexual way. We can do that with our family members, our friends. Sometimes you can actually do it with a stranger more than you can do it with people that you know, because you know they're going to walk away. And so they give you a safe space to connect more deeper with yourself. And that's just how I see it.
Absolutely. And many, many times we can be sexual with someone and not being intimate, you know?
Yeah.
because we're just there like, okay, he wants it or she wants it or whatever, so we're just like in the task, sex becomes another task,
Yeah.
and it has nothing to do with intimacy. And I can be more intimate, like, let's say right now with you in this space that we're not even in the same country,
Yeah.
and I can be more intimate with you than whoever I slept with last night.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting because we all have these beliefs of how it should look like because we've heard the concept that it should mean this. But really, are we really? I think words are just like so messy
Yeah.
in terms of, somebody said that this was called a phone, but it could have been called anything. Really. So I think we just use it for lack of better way to express, but words are super different for everyone.
They are. And I think that's where it becomes really great when we can get into communication and ask, well, how do you define that? Instead of coming to the prejudgment that everybody is using the right definition for words, because a lot of the ways that we use words, we're not using in the proper way of definition. When the twins are, discovering and asking about English, they're like, why did they make this language so complicated? Like one word can have so many different definitions and depending on tone and this and that, like, why did they have to complicate it all? I see where we can run into each other if we don't take a moment to allow context and allow emotions
and experience. I'm always, this has been like a question that I have since I was a little girl. And it's like, are you what I call blue? I know we have an understanding that that's color blue, but do you see it the way I see it? I'm always trying to understand, like, I wish I could go into your brain for just a minute and see how you see blue. Is it the same experience as mine? Probably not, but we just agreed that was color blue, but we see it in different a completely different color. What I call blue, you could be seeing red, but we agree that that's called blue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so for me it's fascinating to understand that human experience, so personal and so individual, and so it should be honored the way each one of us experience life, period.
Why did you choose psychology?
That I don't know if I've shared with you before, but my first career is economics.
Yeah, I remember you saying the finances and going in. Can you share why economics and what transitioned?
Actually, it was not even a question. I never questioned myself. I made those tests that make you take on when you're in last grade of school. In the test that they said, like, you can be whatever you want to be, but finances, lawyer, or a psychologist, like top three. And I was like, oh my goodness, no, finances, because my father was in the economic business, in business. So I was like, that was like, no question. But I was 16 when I entered the university. So I was like super, 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 super young. And no, absolutely no way that I could anyone can decide it. So yeah, anyway, there I went, but I was like, oh my goodness, numbers are so not my thing. And it didn't matter if I spent like 24 hours, like really trying to understand an equation or, it's just like not me. And one day, one of my friends was like, I switched careers and now I'm in psychology. Do you want to see my curriculum? And I was like, sure. And I started reading and I was like, oh my goodness, every class, I was like, oh my goodness, I want to learn about this, So that's how I made the shift. And I started psychology. I was like, I think I had just 1 year left of economics, and then I switched and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to go, so off I went.
How long have you been a psychologist?
I've been a psychologist for 25 years.
That's many decades, many stories, many being able to peek into the human behavior and see how we're very similar at the root of things. It just looks painted different in our human dynamics, yet in the core of it, a lot of similarity that it's difficult to make sense of it and also show the vulnerability of it.
And this is so interesting now because we were talking about just like different experiences and how we could never understand other people's experience. Because one of the greatest causes of suffering, not only for me, it's like, I mean, for me, what I've seen and heard for 25 years of people just lovingly sharing their stories with me, it's like the common denominator is that nobody feels understood. Nobody. Because I want you to see the reality the way I see it. So I get frustrated and I suffer because you don't understand me. You don't get me. You don't see me. It's like very frustrating. And at the end of the day, I think just healing is just understanding that we could never do that. Nobody could do that for you. Even though I tried, that doesn't mean that I don't love you. It's just that it's so different. We've had so many different experiences, so many different wiring that it's just impossible to understand other people's opinions or experiences at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm. What I'm learning too in my own experiences is the deep listening. It's the work to not want to interfere or fix things. Allow people just to express their story. And that's where a lot of people don't feel understood because they get cut off or they're not able to speak in a way that it can start to make sense for them. They've always been kind of told, well, your truth doesn't make sense, so it's not true, where it's like, yet this was my experience. Sometimes people have a misconception that psychologists have it all together and, they're not human and they don't go through anything. What are 3 things that you consistently use to support your mental well-being?
Well, first, movement. I start with the body. Movement. I think if our body is in parasympathetic, it is just way easier to connect with the head, and to regulate emotions. So I always start with the body. Whenever I'm feeling something, I try to move like the energy of my body just to calm down and tune into my parasympathetic. So that's always I try to always have a little bit of movement, around my day. Second, and this is one of the most important things, is just have connections, have community, have friends, like someone that you can be intimate with, or you can just laugh and gossip, but at the end of the day, it's the human experience of someone seeing you as a human being with your flaws, not in your role of being a psychologist or being a coach or being a lawyer, or being whatever you are. But seeing you really deep, into trying to connect with yourself, with your soul, with who you really are behind the knowledge. So that would be second. And third, find a lot of space to pause and breathe. That doesn't mean that I meditate like 2 hours every day. No, it's just like sometimes I'm just driving or I'm just even walking while I'm moving and try to be very mindful of my breathing, of being calm. So if you see, like, the 3 things that I really do are just very based on creating spaces of pause, spaces of connection with me or with the other.
And just like we did at the beginning of the podcast, sometimes we'll forget to just, with our transitions, let's take a breath for a moment so we can wipe away what there is and just drop into this moment and be intentional. I've been doing that with the podcast just to really reintroduce and remind ourselves. Because imagine if going into meetings and all these different things, going into the bank or all this, we just take a moment, let's breathe together. so that we can just interact in a different way, have those pauses in a world where technology is speeding things up so much that everybody wants instant gratification, and we can forget to build those pauses. Because transitions, if you're not intentional with it, you don't realize you're bringing all the stuff and just, tumbling into another, until it becomes so confusing that you don't know where you are or who you're with or what's going on inside yourself. Taking those pauses isn't intentional, and it takes reminders, and it's a practice. Before we started rolling the podcast, we were speaking about grief and how much more depth there is. Yet a lot of people have, I feel, a very superficial definition of grief is only when you've lost a loved one or an animal, a form base. And, we hold space, very limited space for that, because, some people could have lost their parents and, 2 weeks later, people are like, are you over it yet? And it's like, wait a minute. We were speaking about the grief that we experience on the day-to-day. Could you give what you are, defining grief and how you're experiencing it and what you're exploring it?
It's interesting that we just got into grief and stuff because before entering that space, we were speaking about transitions, how to transition to one space to another. And just by the simplest transition, we are already losing something. So for me, grieving is just the mourning, the understanding that something is lost, at least the way it was before. May that be form, or maybe that energy. Like I could be mourning or grieving right now the energy I had this morning when I woke up, and now I'm starting to feel a little bit tired, So that's a transition, and that's not that we should be grieving everything, every single thing in our life, or it's a big grieving. But at the end of the day, we're just like, but just by the fact that we're transitioning every time, we're losing something every single moment. So there lies the importance of the transition, of saying goodbye to the previous moment, goodbye to my black hair, and hello to my white hair, or gray hair, and goodbye to my precious skin, And now it's just entering a new stage where I have to do a little bit more than I did before, So those things that we just that are not really formed in terms of what we're used to call grieving for. Even those things, sometimes we need to make a pause to start transitioning from one stage to the other, like menopause, like every single, it's just a transition, from one work or job to the other, moving, like things that could be also exciting, but there's also grieving on the change, because the change, we always grieve for something, even when we're going for something better that we have yet to know, it's just like because it's the unknown, we need to grieve before going to the next one.
I think sometimes grief gets a bad rap and it's misunderstood. In certain communities, they do it very well. Yet in the broader of our communities, like you said, like everybody's talking about winning and growth, where it's like, okay, there's a loss, like the other side of the coin, there's a loss. And we have to be able to acknowledge that too. So you can make sense of what's the conflict that's going on inside you. Like always getting your way. And then when you don't, oh, boy, the monsters come out. Well, the monsters come out because you didn't allow yourself to know there is loss, and you're going to have to experience that. It's part of life. It's built in, and there's no escaping that.
And yet, it's the thing that we don't talk about ever, even though we, like I was saying, we lose every time. We lose the second, the energy, every single second, we're losing something. We're kind of dying, losing skin, changing skin like every single second of our lives. And yet nobody says anything. And when you start speaking about it, it's like you were talking about, I don't know, something. What? Don't talk about that. Like you were talking about politics or sex in the middle of a dinner, Like it's just like, don't mention it. Like,
It's superstitious. You're going to bring it on. It's an omen. It's like, what do you mean? Like, this is built into life. Like, why are you acting like the elephant isn't in the room? Like, come on now. What is,
hey, you just lost a teeth, like tooth, or you just lost a hair. We're losing constantly,
What would you like to see as conversations?
I would say laws. I would say you were speaking about honesty, and that made me like, that resonated with me in terms of, in order to be honest with someone else, we need to be honest with ourselves, just like the intimacy. And honesty sometimes means staying quiet, not because you lost your voice. It's because being honest means that the other person is not really ready to listen to what your authentic and honest voice. Being honest, sometimes it's just like walk away because the other person that you have in front of you is not understanding what you're saying. So that's more honest than trying to bringing up the truth, So sometimes we misunderstand honesty. So I think that not every person is ready to listen to our honesty or our truth. So, that's another conversation. And transitions in life, in terms of everything, like when your kids go to college and you start losing the role, transitioning into another, it doesn't mean it's sad again, but you need to acknowledge it,
Mm-hmm.
So transitions in, like, how are you feeling because you are changing jobs, even though it's a great opportunity, how is that or you moved from house to house, so everybody assumes that because you moved means that you were happy, and part of you is, but it's also a transition. Like, oh, I recently moved, this is why I'm speaking about this, but just like I lived in my house for 12 years, the previous house. So even though I am in a very the most amazing apartment, and it's beautiful and stuff, that doesn't mean that I was not, having feelings around the transition of living there, my memories, and a lot of things that I accomplished in the other place, which didn't mean that it's one thing or the other. I was feeling both. Yeah. And transition, just like, let's say menopause. I recently started menopause. We know we're all going through it, but there's no conversation. Like I can feel that my smell changed, that my hair just changed. So I'm grieving because I used to have this beautiful hair. Now it's just like, oh my goodness, it takes a lot of time to make it shiny or your skin. The other day I was walking, I had to wear a hat because I was thinking about my skin that gets these dark spots, so you start really transitioning into another space, the gray hair, and should I dye it or not? It's just like those decisions that we are all experiencing at a certain age that we're not talking about. How does it feel to lose your period all of a sudden, or to lose your sex drive, your, everything? That doesn't mean that you don't feel attracted to someone. It's just like, it's not, am I dying? Like, like, oh my goodness, my body is literally dying kind of thing,
Yeah.
So those transitions on how to restructure your life around a foreign body that doesn't respond the same, those conversations, Nat, it's just, we have to be open to have them, to just like in intimacy, like, oh my goodness, my skin doesn't smell the same. Like, like my hair doesn't smell the same, or I don't have the same taste even, like little things that I've been noticing because I'm always like curious about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like just noticing, like, oh my goodness, the face cream that I used to use like forever is just not doing anything to my skin. It's not hydrating my skin. It's just like, what? And we do not have these conversations. If is it natural? Is it happening to
Yeah.
you too?
Yeah. Like you said, it's being able to open up the conversations, that no more that we have to kind of second guess, that we should feel like it's a taboo, that you don't talk about that, just keep it to yourself and deal with it. It's like, no, this is a human body that we're all navigating. Why can't we not talk about this stuff? Like it's not an inconvenience. These are real things that go on, and let me have a type of normalization, that I don't have to feel alone. And if there is other people not feeling this, then maybe this is an indication that I need to seek help from the medical field to find out some information. Yet if I don't have to go bombard the medical field, and I can just talk to sister friends, even some males that had sisters that experienced, because just because a male doesn't physiologically go through it, it doesn't mean that he hasn't heard stories around him where he's like, oh yeah, my sister or my friend or whatever. And we can kind of forget to bring the both sexes in conversations too. That it's like, oh, you just wouldn't understand. And it's like, how about you try a person first?
No, and actually sometimes when men are very interested in women, they're very well educated on the gene, more well educated than we are. So sometimes it's easier to find a man that knows better about the woman's body than we ourselves.
Do you have children?
No, I don't. No, I don't have children.
Can you explain the choice for that?
Well, at an early age, I would say I started to develop this metabolic problem. My body started to produce tumors, so they had to take, like from surgery. So I was left only with 1/4 of an ovary. Okay. So the doctor by then told me, you need to think about having kids soon because your ovarian reserve is very small. I, again, question myself and went within and look for help, of my therapist back then. After just a few sessions, it wasn't that much. I just concluded that I was not going to have kids because I couldn't have kids. That was back then. And I never thought about it after, It was just like a decision, a very conscious decision, I would say, at the moment. And then, okay, that was the decision. And it was just like not question after, So that was the reason, It's interesting now because I did my master's thesis on the definition of femininity, like what made us be a woman, like define yourself as a woman, And that was one of the questions because I wanted to see, because of my own, I haven't thought about it in a long time, but the decision I made of not having kids was like part of the processing. What was why I chose that topic, like what is the definition of being a woman, and of course, a lot of people said that, or a lot of women said that it was because of biology. Another, like, it was a big sample that said having kids, that was like the realization. But at the end in the study, it was only the belief that made you a woman, that, it was not, because a lot of those women said that wouldn't have given the choice after having kids, like now they're older, they would have chosen not to. You know what I mean? So that's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And I just wanted to empower some of the women that are, rumbling and they don't have spaces. Because what's wrong with me just saying, I don't want to have kids, and everybody's trying to change my decision for me? or trying to. And so sometimes I, like you said, the honesty, I'm just going to stay silent because you cannot hear my own truth because you believe that your way is more important than what my own decision is for myself, that you have a higher like understanding of things, and like as if I'm not in tune with myself, like I'm going to miss out on something. And I see that a lot more in the culture and society of things. When I was young, I made a decision. I didn't want to have kids, and I wanted to be a child psychologist. Yet I didn't follow the child psychologist thing. So as life would have it, I had kids. And so when there's frustrations that come up with the kids, that 13-year-old that said, you made a decision not to have kids. And then I have to sit with like, I didn't honor that choice that I made. Yet I also see too that I didn't honor to be a child psychologist. So the two decisions, it evolved in a different way. And so it's like, okay, well, you don't want to do it this way and you don't want to do it that way, yet it has to come out in some way so you have an understanding. I can appreciate that when you make a decision, it's to stand in it and not create more suffering of the what ifs. Because again, we're talking about the loss.
Yes. And also I would say that little Natalie at 13, of course, had a reason to say, I don't want to have kids. But you don't know. I mean, I could change my mind tomorrow, and say, no, I really want a kid right now at 47. Maybe, no, I do want to have a kid right now. And I could adopt. It's just like, don't get married to the idea that you are fixed and that an idea that you had like 20 years ago is the same idea that you have now. That's very, and also very empowering for people, like for your friend that they like for now, no, let's see tomorrow.
That it changes.
Yeah, it changes because the other, it's just like, okay, maybe she will decide, but they don't try to convince you,
Yeah.
And so that's like, oh, today I'm deciding not to have. Let's see tomorrow, whatever. Like you don't have to make fixed choices unless you decide to be a mom, then you're going to be a mom forever. But it's just like staying in present moment, and that could change. I never, see myself as when people like try to ask you or ask me like, are you heterosexual, homosexual, non-binary, or whatever the spectrum is? I'm like, today I'm heterosexual. Tomorrow I might be gay, or the next day I could be non-binary. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like,
for me, it was the deconstruction of seeing the influence of having children because of religion, because of other people. So I could see the choice of children was influenced heavily by others, that it wasn't a grounding of my own choice. So that's why when the 13-year-old comes up and it was like, you made a decision not to do this. And so the deconstruction of that and being honest that, okay, but you made a choice to be a mom. So you have to show up in this too, even though at 13, you saw certain things. And so for me, it was just that deconstruction and be able to, some people that are parents haven't done that deconstruction to understand, like, why are you a parent? A lot of people are just, oh, well, I became a parent because that's the thing you do. And it's like, oh, really? Are you sure about that? Like, do you see where maybe sometimes you can rustle into things because you haven't really seen, was that a choice for you, or was it influenced by a lot of culture, which we're always influenced by culture. I just did the deconstruction for myself to really understand that. And so when those waves come up, I'm like, you still made a choice. I understand the promise and the commitment that you wanted to make, yet there were other influences and you made that choice. So don't come saying, culture and this, and I did it for that. It's like you still stood by your choice, even though, and that's what it is.
And we can always give it back. Like the questions, we can always give it back. Sometimes when I'm really tired and someone still asks me, and I'm like, oh, I see it makes you uncomfortable that I don't have kids. Tell me about that,
Yeah.
Because it's not about me. What do people care? Like It's
Yeah.
not like they're paying or non-paying my. So anyway, it's just like sometimes you can give like the question back because the question is about them. What
Yeah.
about a woman not having kids makes you uncomfortable?
I'm going to have you reflect and bring yourself back to when you were 18. And I'm going to ask you to take this awareness and speak back to that 18-year-old. What are 3 words you would tell that 18-year-old?
Trust yourself before you trust someone else. You hold so much power and it will reveal, and you are strong and important.
Is there anything that you would like to bring forth to the listeners?
I would say that I would like them to leave this space for now, knowing that we are just human experiences. Don't try to make yourself be understood by the other, or don't try to understand the other. I think human suffering is just about acceptance of those experiences that come from a million of causes and effects in the other's life. So as long as we can just honor that, the world would be so much closer. I'm not saying we will not have any problems or differences. It would just be very loving and connected, and we could actually grow and evolve more by accepting that we just have different experiences, and we can learn from someone else's experience, but don't try to understand with your head all the time, but come from an awakened heart to a discerning mind all the time.
I like that. Awakened heart to a discerning mind all the time.
It's that integration of always tapping into your heart first, but understanding, then just like connecting it with logic, with discernment at the end of the day. So always from an awakened heart, from love, to a discerning mind, to understand who this concept about honesty, about laws, about they all come first from this open heart, to then discern, who am I talking to? Is this person going to be able to understand what I'm saying, or at least open to understand the difference? So always from an awakened heart to a discerning mind.
Where can the listeners find you?
My email is Andrea Gonzalez, both Z's, Gonzalez, at ufm.edu. So if you want to connect, you can write me an email and I will be responding and happy to have your emails.
Thank you. And I'll make sure to put it in the show notes so they can know where to connect with you. Awesome. I want to thank you for being on the podcast, for having an open-hearted conversation that was intimate and vulnerable. I really appreciate being in your energy. We've been connecting, yet to do it in this way. And I look forward to when it can be in person and share a really tight hug. I really do appreciate everything that you are and what you bring into this world. You are so appreciated, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for your words. I really enjoy our conversation too, and look forward to keep connecting in any shape or form that we can. So just be good and from love.
Remember, be kind and soft with yourself.
Yes, always. Thank you.
Thank you for making it all the way to the end. I appreciate you and your time. If you found anything that was relevant, or perhaps there's somebody that you think can benefit from this podcast, please share it out. Help grow the community. Help grow Lift Oneself. You can find more information on our website at www.liftoneself.com. Until next time, be sure to be kind and soft with yourself. You matter.